Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is part one of a series on using bullet nib markers, all sorts of different techniques that you can use bullet nibs for. So bullet nibs get a bit of a bad press sometimes in the art world because they are not as good as brush markers, especially for blending, but they do have their uses and they're not all that bad, so do give bullet nibs a chance. They're also cheaper than brush markers, so that's also good if you've got a low budget, and you can create some really good art pieces with them. So the first technique I'm going to be doing is Pointillism, and Pointillism is just basically colouring in with a series of dots, so not colouring in like you would normally colour a flat surface, but you're colouring in with a series of dots and layering up the shading that way. And bullet nibs are absolutely great for this because they are a standard size point and you can just get the same size dots. If you did this with a brush nib, you'd get a variation in size dots, and that can be quite a good effect as well, but with bullet nibs you get the same size, so I think it works really well. And I'm using Winsor & Newton Pro markers for this piece because Pro markers have a really hard bullet nib, whereas some bullet nibs like the Spectrum Noir markers have quite a soft spongy nib, so they're easier to blend, but the Winsor & Newton have a very solid bullet nib, so that's what I'm using for this picture. So I sketched out the design onto some A6 paper from one of my sketchbooks. I think it was a Winsor & Newton sketchbook actually, so that fits quite well. Not sponsored by Winsor & Newton, but I just use Winsor & Newton supplies for this. So I didn't want to create any line art because that doesn't really work with Pointillism. The idea is that the dots kind of merge together, so with some big heavy line work, which what I normally do wouldn't really work with this technique, so I left out the line art and I just sketched out the design lightly in pencil so I could erase it later or the dots would cover it up anyway. So I decided to go for a fish because fish are quite scaly and I thought dots would work quite well, and I could get some really deep colours in the water, and I thought mixing all sorts of greens and blues and browns into the water would be quite fun and would look quite good. So yeah, I started with the fish, going in with the orange splotches on the fish's back, and then also use some of the pastel-y colours to create the body, and that doesn't show too well on camera, but I kind of built up layers of some cool grey, some pastel pink, some lavender colours, just to make it not just white. And then on the lily pads I use a mixture of greens and some browns to make the holes, and for the water I used a indigo blue. They don't have a Prussian blue in Pro markers. They might do. Let me know if you have a Prussian blue Pro marker because I want it. And yeah, I used a dark blue and a dark brown and some dark greens and a khaki colour as well, I think, and also some pastel blue and some cool greys to blend out the highlights of the water. And I really quite like how the water turned out in the end. It took a while to kind of get it to the stage, but I do like how it turned out. So a good technique for Pointillism is to just build up the layers. Start with your layer of base colour. I did this for the lily pads and the fish because then that gives you your starting point, and then you can add the layers of shadows on top because you can make the lighter colours dark quite easily, but you can't do it the other way around. So that would be my advice if you try this, is to start with the kind of mid-tones to lighter colour and then build up the shadow. I didn't do this so much in the water because I wanted to mark out where the darker places would be, but I didn't start off too dark, so I added layers of blue and brown to get the really darker tones in the water. But yeah, layering up, it does take quite a while, so I would advise that you do something on a small piece of paper like I did. I was so thankful that I used a small piece of paper by the time I finished because it took quite a long time. It's a lot slower than just colouring in how you would normally colour in with markers. Even though you're not blending, you have to do lots of tiny dots. So get yourself an audiobook or some Netflix or some YouTube on in the background because this will take you a while. But I do think it's worth it overall because you get to see how all the tiny little dots make up a picture, and the texture is really quite satisfying. So Pointillism was developed in the 1880s by the Impressionist artists, and it became, the term Pointillism kind of came into art critic dialogue, if that's the right term, in the 1890s, early 20th century. And the majority of Pointillism was done in oil paint. That's because it was easy to place, and also the thickness and texture, it didn't bleed or run. But you can do Pointillism with anything. You can use acrylics, they would work quite well, and you could also use water-based markers for this technique because you're not colouring with them, you're not trying to blend them, you're just making lots of little dots. So you could even just get a pack of cheap children's water-based markers and they would do just as good a job, but you couldn't for example, like I do later on, use a colourless blender to lift some of the colour. That wouldn't work with the water-based markers, but you could certainly do just as good a job with water-based markers if that's all you have. So if you're new here, welcome. My name is Katie. I make art videos and I upload a new video every Thursday, so do feel free to subscribe and join the community that we have here. I sometimes upload a bonus video on a Sunday. Next week I'm going to be uploading a bonus video, not this Sunday but early next week, because I've recently joined the Artists Guild, and that is a group of artists that do a collaboration every month or so, and I will be uploading the video early next week when that goes out, so do click the notification bell if you don't want to miss that. I'm really excited about this group that I've just joined, and I've met some really great people, and I can't wait to share with you what I'm going to do. And you should also check out their channels, which I will leave in the description of the next video, so do look out for that. And also I have recently launched a Patreon because I want to make better videos for you all, because my equipment is really limited. I only have a very basic camera and very basic lighting, and I really do want to upgrade that. So I've put up a Patreon site, and I'll leave that in the description below, and I'll leave a card up the top so you can check out the video if you want to. On there I have uploaded an exclusive colouring page of the Rapunzel mouse and an exclusive Charlie picture, so if you want to check that out, that would be awesome. But I just want to thank you all for your support on this channel so far. Thank you for subscribing and commenting. I really do read all your comments and I try to respond to them all, so thank you so much, and thank you so much for all the likes that you have left, and just thank you for being part of this community. So once I'd finished filling in all the dots for the water, which took a long time and I almost gave up, but I got there, I used my colourless blender, again a pro marker, to go over the top and make some highlights, some kind of waves to make it look like the fish is under the water, not floating on top. So yeah, that took quite a while to get the alcohol to bleed through and remove some of the colour, because there were quite a few layers, especially in the darker areas, so I had to be quite careful and be patient with that. But it did work eventually. It didn't quite work at first, but once I had put several layers, that worked. And I still used dots. I didn't do a line or anything, I just used a series of dots, quite a lot of pressure. And then afterwards I used a slight hint of white gel pen just on the sheen of the water and the sheen of the fish, and this just kind of lifted it out a little bit. I didn't go overboard with this because there is a danger of going overboard with white gel pen, and I've been very guilty of that in the past, as some of you might know. But yeah, I just wanted to lift it up, and again I used a dotting technique. I didn't do any lines or anything because I wanted it to be a completely pointillism piece. So let me know in the comments below whether you've ever tried pointillism yourself, or if you have any techniques that you use for bullet markers. I'd love to hear them, and I'd love to experiment with them. And here is the final result. I really like how this piece turned out, although it took a while and I was getting quite bored towards the end, especially with the water, but I think it turned out quite well. So that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like this video, emotionally, please do leave it a like down below, as that really helps me out. But that's all for now, and I'll see you next Thursday. Bye for now.